Hi, and welcome to Westferry Times. I'm Alina Ward, your host, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Rachel Elwood. Dr. Elwood is a senior fellow in European politics at King's College London, a commentator for The Guardian. And, well, you've been following Brexit since before the referendum even happened, haven't you? A very warm welcome to Westferry Times.
Thank you, Elena. It's good to be here. It certainly has been a long road.
It really has, and it's kind of hard to believe, isn't it? Over 4 years since the UK officially left the EU. But Brexit is still, well, it's such a significant force. You feel it shaping the economy, politics, even our sort of national identity.
Absolutely. It's far from over.
So that's what this deep dive is about. We really want to get a clear picture of where Brexit stands today. Look at the promises versus the realities, the practical challenges, what's still being negotiated, and, how it's actually impacting everyday lives. And we're really grateful for your expertise to help us navigate all this.
Well, thanks. It's definitely a crucial conversation. Brexit wasn't just a single event, was it? It's very much an ongoing process. We're still seeing all the ripple effects, policy, trade, relationships.
Yeah.
It keeps evolving.
It really does feel like we're still adjusting. If you had to boil it down, just one sentence, where is Brexit right now?
Okay, one sentence. I'd probably say the UK has left the EU, but it hasn't yet settled into its new identity economically, diplomatically, or constitutionally.
Right. Still finding its feet. That's a great starting point. Okay, let's dig into one of the biggest areas, trade. We have the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA. That's the bedrock now, isn't it? How's it actually working out?
Well, the TCA agreed right at the end of 2020. It did give us that zero tariff, zero quota trade with the EU.
Which sounds good on paper.
It does. But the crucial thing, the bit everyone needs to grasp, is that leaving the single market and customs union means it's not frictionless anymore.
Okay.
Exactly. So for businesses, that means, well, a lot more paperwork, customs declarations, and having to deal with rules diverging between the UK and EU.
So no tariffs, but hurdles instead. What's the real-world impact then, especially for, say, smaller companies?
Oh, it's very real, especially for SMEs, small and medium businesses. Many are finding the extra costs, the admin. It's just becoming unsustainable. You have these complex rules of origin proving where stuff comes from for the zero tariffs. That's tough.
Sounds like a headache.
It is. And you get delays at ports, more checks. We're seeing sectors like food and drink, chemicals, car parts. They're feeling it quite acutely. Think about a small food producer. Before, easy export to France or Germany. Now, a mountain of forms, potential delays.
Their products could spoil or just become too expensive?
Precisely. It acts like a non-tariff barrier, and it hits the smaller guys hardest. It might even force some to just focus on the UK market, which is a big strategic shift.
It really highlights those trade-offs, doesn't it? Taking back control has these, well, very practical, nitty-gritty consequences.
Exactly. Economic independence isn't just a concept. It means dealing with these logistical realities.
Okay, let's shift to another really thorny issue. Northern Ireland. We had the protocol, now the Windsor framework. Can you update us on that? It's always seemed so complicated.
It is complex and incredibly sensitive. So the original protocol was meant to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland.
Right. Keep trade flowing north-south.
Yes. But to do that, it effectively put a customs border in the Irish Sea between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And that caused significant political upset.
Understandably.
So the Windsor framework agreed early 2023 tried to fix this. It brought in green lanes and red lanes.
Green and red lanes. Okay.
Green lane is for goods just going from GB to NI and staying there, much simpler checks. Red lane is for goods that might go on into the EU, so they get the full checks.
So it aimed to smooth things out. Did it work? Politically, I mean.
It certainly eased some practical trade issues, but no, it hasn't fully resolved the political tensions. Crucially, the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, they still haven't returned to power sharing at Stormont.
And why not? What's their main objection now?
Their core argument hasn't really changed. They argue that, fundamentally, EU law still applies in Northern Ireland for goods to keep that open border with the Republic.
I see.
And they feel this undermines UK sovereignty, creating a sort of different status for Northern Ireland within the UK. It touches on very deep issues of identity.
Is it purely sovereignty, or do they argue there are actual economic downsides for NI businesses under this framework compared to GB businesses?
That's definitely part of it too, yes. The argument is that it creates an uneven playing field, different regulatory environments. It's a mix of political principle and perceived economic disadvantage.
Wow. It just shows how Brexit keeps throwing up these really profound challenges for the UK's internal balance, too.
Absolutely. Finding something acceptable to all communities in Northern Ireland remains incredibly difficult.
Okay, let's pivot to another major Brexit promise. Immigration. Ending free movement. We now have the points-based system. How's that panning out?
Well, the points-based system definitely gives the government more control over who comes in, aiming for skilled workers, theoretically reducing numbers.
That was the goal.
Yes. But there have been pretty clear negative impacts in certain sectors, those that really relied on EU workers before. Think agriculture, social care, hospitality.
They're struggling to find people.
Big time. We're seeing really significant ongoing labor shortages in those areas.
So, control achieved, but at a cost to certain industries.
Yeah.
How are businesses coping? Are they managing to recruit from elsewhere?
Some are trying, yes. Recruiting more from outside the EU, the visa system allows for that. But it's not straightforward. There are costs. Sponsoring visas isn't cheap. The paperwork can be, well, bureaucratic. And then there's integrating workers, training. It's not always a simple swap for the free movement we had.
I remember reading about, I think it was Scottish seafood firms, hit by customs delays and struggling for staff because of immigration changes. Is that typical?
That kind of story is quite common, yes.
Yeah.
It illustrates how different Brexit impacts can combine.
And of course, all this happened around the same time as the pandemic, which must have made everything worse.
That's a really crucial point. You had the new Brexit immigration rules cooking in just as COVID caused massive global disruption. It created a kind of perfect storm for labor supply in some areas.
Right. Okay, let's talk about how people feel about Brexit now. Public opinion. The debate never seems to completely go away. What are the polls saying?
Well, public attitudes have definitely shifted. Pretty consistently now, polls show a growing number of people think Brexit has been more harmful than good, especially economically. There was a YouGov poll, I think early 2025, showing something like 58% think leaving was a mistake.
58%. That's quite a majority thinking it was wrong. Does that mean people want to rejoin, though? Is there an appetite for another referendum?
That's where it gets more complicated.
Yeah.
While there's clearly more regret, or regret as some call it,
Regret, right.
most of the main political parties aren't suggesting we rejoin. Not the EU, not even the single market or customs union. There seems to be a general sort of fatigue with the whole issue, a desire to make the current situation work better rather than go through another huge divisive campaign.
So less about reversing the decision, more about managing where we are now.
Exactly. The focus, politically at least, seems to be much more on the practicalities of life outside the EU.
And how has Brexit actually changed UK politics itself? It was such a defining, divisive issue for years.
Oh, fundamentally. It redrew the political map. The Conservatives absolutely became the party of Brexit, which helped them electorally for a while.
Definitely.
But now they're grappling with the consequences, trying to deliver on those promises, which is proving difficult.
Thinking back to the promises, what would you say has been the biggest unexpected headache for the Conservatives in managing Brexit's reality?
That's a good question. Perhaps the sheer difficulty in squaring the circle between different factions within the party who had very different ideas of what Brexit should look like, the push for deregulation versus maintaining market access, for example.
Right. And Labour. What's their position now?
Labour's approach is, well, pragmatic but cautious, you could say. Their line is, make Brexit work. They talk about seeking closer alignment in certain areas if it's in the UK interest, but they've firmly ruled out rejoining the EU or the single market or customs union.
A careful balancing act, then.
Very much so. Trying to win back different groups of voters without reopening those old wounds.
And what about the nations? Scotland, particularly, voted strongly Remain.
Yes. Brexit has definitely given the Scottish independence movement fresh energy. The fact that Scotland voted Remain but left the EU anyway, because of the UK-wide vote, is a major ongoing grievance for the SNP and others. The next UK general election could be quite significant here, depending on the result and how it plays out in Scotland.
Okay, turning outwards now. The UK's place in the world. We heard a lot about global Britain. How has Brexit affected our international standing?
Well, the global Britain idea was about the UK being more independent, outward-looking, striking deals globally, especially focusing on the Indo-Pacific.
And we have seen some new trade deals, right? Australia, Japan.
Yes, those deals have been signed. That's progress on that front. But we need perspective. Trade with the EU still absolutely dwarfs trade with these other regions. The EU is, by far, still our biggest trading partner.
Right, geography still matters.
It really does. So while the UK is diversifying, those European ties remain economically crucial. Beyond trade, the UK is also working to kind of redefine its diplomatic voice, its defense role, operating outside the EU structures, still finding its independent path.
So looking ahead, Brexit's clearly not going away. What are the key things to watch out for?
Well, 2025 is actually quite important. The TCA, the trade deal, has a built-in review clause for 5 years after it started.
Ah, so a chance to potentially tweak things.
Exactly. It's an opportunity for both sides, the UK and the EU, to potentially revisit parts of the agreement. Things like rules for professional services, maybe mobility for business or specific groups, energy cooperation. Those could be up for discussion.
Interesting. So not a wholesale renegotiation maybe, but adjustments. What else could shape the future relationship?
Elections, definitely. Who's in power in the UK and also across key EU countries will matter. Different governments might have different priorities for the UK-EU relationship, and that underlying question will persist.
Yeah.
Can we get closer alignment in specific areas for mutual benefit without actually rejoining?
You mentioned things like veterinary agreements, youth mobility, maybe even something like the Erasmus student exchange program earlier.
Yes, I think those are the kinds of areas where you might see movement. Things that are politically easier, perhaps, than touching single market membership, but could bring real economic or social benefits. A veterinary agreement, for example, could massively reduce friction for food and farming exports. Youth mobility could rebuild some cultural bridges.
Practical steps, maybe?
Potentially, yes. Small steps towards a more functional relationship.
Dr. Elwood, this has been incredibly illuminating. As we wrap up, if there's one key takeaway about Brexit now, what would you want our listeners to hold on to?
I think the most important thing to grasp is that Brexit isn't done. It wasn't a moment, it's a process. We're still figuring out the UK's long-term place, its relationship with Europe and the world. We're still writing those next chapters. And how we choose to engage with our European neighbors, that's going to define our future more than perhaps we currently realize.
Still writing the next chapters. That's a really powerful thought to end on. Dr. Rachel Elwood, thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us today on Westferry Times. It's been invaluable.
Thank you, Elena. It's been a pleasure.
And that wraps up our deep dive into Brexit today. If you found today's discussion valuable, please do make sure to subscribe to the Westferry Times YouTube channel. We've got lots more analysis coming up. And why not share this episode with friends or family who might also find it interesting? Thank you for watching Westferry Times.